Now, from KELOLAND Media Group, an Inside KELOLAND Health Beat special, legalizing medical marijuana.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Angela Kennecke. In just a few days, Initiated Measure 26, which legalizes medical marijuana, takes effect in South Dakota. On this week's Inside KELOLAND, we're talking with the State Department of Health and the sponsor of IM26 about the latest on the medical marijuana program and what will happen on July 1st when the initiated measure takes effect. We'll also find out what is happening with Amendment A, which legalizes recreational marijuana. Governor Kristi Noem recently released an ad letting South Dakotans know that everything for medical marijuana is on schedule.
Throughout the rules and the public input process, the Departments of Education and Health have been careful in their approach. Other states have made mistakes that we do not want to repeat.
She also says the state is committed to starting a medical marijuana program as quickly and responsibly as possible. Well, joining us now are South Dakota Health Secretary Kim Malsom-Risden and the sponsor of Initiated Measure 26, Melissa Metley. Thank you both for joining us. Kim, let's get started with you. The biggest question is what exactly is happening on July 1st with medical marijuana?
Well, IM26, which was the initiated measure that voters passed back in November, becomes effective in state law on July 1st. And so there are several provisions of that law that are now on our books. And we at the Department of Health are working actively to set up the parts of the program that we're responsible for. It's going to take a little bit of time after July 1st for those pieces to be in place. But again, IM26 also contemplated that it would take some time for the program to be established in the state and specifically put in some time frames to have different aspects of the program operational.
So, Kim, what does the state exactly have to do? I know we've talked about in previous news stories about the medical marijuana cards. What steps do you have to take?
So we are in the process right now of establishing administrative rules for how different aspects of the program will run. That's everything from, how people will apply for marijuana cards to the rules for establishments, which includes cultivators and manufacturers and dispensaries. And so we, in fact, just released the first draft set of rules to start getting input on those rules to make sure that the program is going to be safe and responsible and in line with what the voters voted for. So we'll be starting that input process formally here next week. We've got some town hall meeting opportunities on Monday night. People can go to South Dakota, our webpage for this, which is medcannabissouthdakota.gov and sign up for one of the telephone town halls.
Oh, great. We'll be sure to put that information on our website under this program as well. So we'll actually be taking public input. So really anybody can say what they want and what they're looking for in a program like this.
Absolutely. And it's really just to help also explain some of the parts of the law that some folks might not understand, and just, again, help with that education process, help, people understand what's coming, and to get that input so that the program can be successful.
Well, let's turn to Melissa now and talk about the importance of passing IM26. You were one of the sponsors of the measure. And 70% of South Dakota voters approved it. Why did you want to bring medical marijuana to South Dakota?
I saw a need that back in 2016, patients were looking for more information and looking at ways to bring access to South Dakota and seeing the basically the culture come across the nation and the patient stories, especially children with seizure disorders, the efficacy that we had seen and parents that were looking for more information. We kind of got together and started really researching South Dakota law and how the ballot initiative process worked and decided it was a place that we wanted to test in South Dakota. We weren't really sure that first year that we would get on the ballot or that it would pass, but we wanted to start an educational program that lasted 6 years and finally got us on the ballot and passed us in November to provide access for the state.
Now, Melissa, many critics say that passing medical marijuana or getting medical marijuana passed in a state is one way to open the door for recreational marijuana. And we saw both, obviously, on this last ballot that passed. Is that the case, or is medical marijuana its standalone issue?
Medical marijuana is a standalone issue, and it's important for people to understand that the reason that our organization New Approach supported both initiatives was because we wanted to ensure that there was two distinct paths forward for cannabis in the state of South Dakota. Medical is really important, and data collection for, say, the Department of Health, or when we get to federal legalization, we need to know what marijuana can do for patients. And by keeping those programs completely separate, we still get an opportunity to track that and see how its efficacy is really, truly working. And so it's definitely two paths forward. We want to keep it two paths forward and ensure that South Dakota has the best, safest, and most effective program in the U.S.
Melissa, who do you envision medical marijuana helping the most?
If you were to ask me this question 6 years ago, I would have given you just children. But over 6 years, I've met a lot of patients in the state. We represent just over 1,000 families with New Approach, and what I found is those patients vary from 6-week-old babies that have seizure disorders and all the way up to people in their 90s who are suffering from arthritis. That pool is huge.
All right, so a lot of people with a lot of different conditions. So, Kim, can we talk about what conditions will qualify under South Dakota law, and could those actually evolve over time as well?
Absolutely. And so the law talks about medical marijuana patients being those people with debilitating medical conditions where there are either as a part of the condition or its treatment, significant issues with things like pain or muscle spasms or wasting syndrome that really impair people's lives. And so right now, the definition in law is symptom-based. And in addition, the person would qualify if their physician in South Dakota feels that they would benefit from the use of medical cannabis. The other part of the law is that the Department of Health has to have a process for people to petition us to add specific conditions to a list that would qualify in the future. And so the draft rules that we've just put out, contemplate how that can happen. So we do know that the list will likely evolve into the future, and that's been the experience in other states as well.
That the list has been added to as other states are well ahead of us. Have we learned things from other states in that specific area?
Yeah, I think we have, and I think there have been states that have taken the same approach that we have, which is start with a pretty finite number of symptoms that cause people a lot of issues, and then really evaluate the needs of the population. And so we have a process in place for that to happen. But I think that I think this will work well for us. Some other states have, started their program with, long lists of conditions, and I think have seen some unanticipated consequences going that approach.
And exactly how are hospitals and health systems preparing for this? Because we have reported that some health systems are like, okay, we're going to allow our physicians to prescribe it. Other health systems are taking a wait-and-see attitude.
Sure. So I know hospitals and physicians and others across the state are working very hard to understand the law and what it means. And, now that we have our rules out there, they'll be certainly looking at those and providing input. And making the determination about how to serve their patients, and I do think that's what this is about. I think that's the intent of the law, was the intent of the voters, and certainly the intent of the healthcare community to provide the best care possible to patients across the state. And so I think the decisions that individuals will make will be with that in mind.
And Melissa, can you talk to us a little bit about how South Dakota tribes are preparing to implement medical marijuana? They have their own set of rules as sovereign nations, but they must also follow state laws.
I think that's a great question to ask the tribal governments. I do. I can't answer for them.
Okay, but if the law takes effect July 1st and medical marijuana is available on reservations, will people be able to use, if they have, let's say, a physician's prescription from another state, will they be able to use that in South Dakota? Do you know?
It's a question I can't answer.
Okay, but we have been doing some research, and it seems that it's important that the state law is followed no matter what. Kim, can you maybe address that?
Sure. So IM 26 included provisions for the state's medical marijuana program or medical cannabis program. And it also included some provisions for what would happen or how things would work between July 1st and those dates, October 29th, November 18th, when we'll have the state program up and running. And so I would encourage people to really look at the law. Again, it's South Dakota Codified Law 3420G, and it has provisions in there for medical marijuana patients before the state program is up and running. Obviously, at the Department of Health, we can't give legal advice to folks, and
Sure.
we'd encourage people to, talk with law enforcement and others about their options.
Because about the earliest you see this program being implemented from the state health department is for people to get physicians' prescriptions would be November or December.
Yeah, so, a little bit about the time frame there. So we, again, have, we're getting input right now on the rules that will help us set up this program. We're also working on another component of the program that's going to be really critical, and that's the system that we'll use to issue cards to individuals, as well as register the different establishments that will be providing marijuana to people. And so that system will not only perform that function, but it will also be used to validate, a person's card. And so we want to make sure that that the people that need this, medical marijuana are able to get it, but yet people that really don't qualify are not participating. And so we're working, we have an RFP out right now. We've gotten responses to that, so we're evaluating some vendors to be able to help set up that system. So we're working on that as well. We do anticipate, meeting the timelines that are in the law. And again, those timelines come out of IM 26.
Sure.
That's the end of October for both the rules being in place and our system being in place. And then by the middle of November, being able to issue cards.
Right. We will continue to discuss this. We have to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back with more questions on medical marijuana. Welcome back to this special Health Beat edition of Inside KELOLAND. We are going to talk to Melissa Metley right now about what protections there are under IM 26 starting July 1st for patients who have medical marijuana before the state program is up and running. Melissa, can you address that?
Absolutely. Starting July 1, patient protections do go into place, and this means that patients in the state of South Dakota that possess a card from out of state or are currently in communication with their physician regarding use of medical cannabis for medical reasons would not face prosecution for their use of medical cannabis. These patient protections run through mid-December. That would allow the state enough time to put in place their framework and set up the program. And so it's just an interim time frame that gives patients a little extra protection because they've waited so long for access in the state.
And we are also joined by South Dakota Secretary of Health, Kim Malson-Risden. And I was wondering, Kim, what do you think the biggest misperceptions are around medical marijuana in South Dakota?
Well, a couple of things here. First of all, physicians will be involved with providing a written certification for a patient to be a medical marijuana patient, but they will not be providing prescriptions for marijuana. And the reason for that is because marijuana is a Schedule I drug at the federal level, and so physicians are not allowed to write prescriptions for it. What that means in the real world is that individuals who are medical marijuana patients will access their marijuana at a dispensary, or if they're cultivating it at home, without the benefit of, dosing recommendations, how often to take the product. And so I think that just makes it harder for folks that, are maybe newer to using medical cannabis to, find something that provides relief for them. But again, the certification is not a prescription. The other thing that's important to understand is that medical cannabis is not dispensed at pharmacies like you would see medicines typically provided. And so people will access medical cannabis at dispensaries that will likely be set up in communities across the state.
Or they can grow some in their home. And so I've used that term, physician's prescription, and that really wouldn't be accurate.
That's correct, yes. It's really a certification by the physician that you meet the patient qualifications, and then the process will be for the person to apply to the Department of Health. Upon receiving your card, then you would access medical cannabis either at a dispensary, or if you're certified to cultivate at home, you would have that option.
What about you, Melissa? What do you think are the biggest things that are wrong, the biggest misconceptions out there?
I think the biggest misconception is that IM 26 was a placeholder for a rec program. There's a lot of protections in there that keep this a patient-focused program. I think another really big misconception is that the word dispensary is always used in a term that's derogatory or isn't used in the proper way. Dispensary staff are highly trained individuals that are really well versed in how cannabis works, how cannabinoids work with other medications, how cannabinoids work with each other, how terpenes work. So any good dispensary is going to have a very well-trained staff that is going to be able to help guide this process for patients. Cannabis, just like medicine, is incredibly individualized. So what may work for me may not work for you, even if we have the same diagnoses. And so those dispensary agent staff members are key to ensuring that patients have good information. And dispensaries are great resources, especially for patients, and really bridging that gap between provider and patient.
So do those people running the dispensaries who would have all this knowledge, are they required to meet some kind of standards or have some kind of certification?
There is several certification programs out there for dispensary agent staffing. In fact, there's a program through Green Flower that does college-level courses, which most dispensaries will invest in that education for their employees, because you want to ensure that you have the best staff possible and that your turnover is really low. So yes, there are certifications out there, and any good business owner is going to invest in them.
But not a requirement under the law?
Not a requirement.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us and helping our viewers better understand the medical marijuana issue and program and how it will work in South Dakota. And after the break, we find out what is happening with recreational marijuana. You are watching Inside KELOLAND. Welcome back. Over the last half hour, we've been talking about medical marijuana becoming legal in South Dakota. Voters also approved recreational marijuana. Joining us now is Matthew Schweik. He's the Deputy Director of the Marijuana Policy Project and was also heavily involved in helping legalize marijuana in South Dakota. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the state Supreme Court, we're still waiting for a decision on the appeal regarding Amendment A. Can you tell us what that means exactly for July 1st for recreational marijuana when it is was supposed to become legal in the state?
That's right. July 1st was the original effective date of Amendment A, but a lower court in South Dakota ruled that Amendment A was unconstitutional. We then appealed to the state Supreme Court. Until the South Dakota Supreme Court rules on that appeal, Amendment A will not take effect. So if we don't have a ruling before July 1st, Amendment A will not go into effect. If the ruling happens a week after July 1st, then that's when Amendment A will take effect.
How frustrating is that for you? I know how involved you were on both IM 26 and Amendment A.
It's frustrating that the will of the people is not being respected. It's very frustrating that Governor Noem has been using taxpayer money to fund this political lawsuit while we have to work very hard to raise money to pay our legal bills. But it's frustrating just not to see this policy get put into effect. The people of South Dakota voted for this by a strong majority. 54% of voters approved Amendment A. And we want to see the benefits of this policy. But we know that nothing comes easy in politics, and we've been working very hard to make sure that we fund a very strong legal defense. I think that our lawyers put forth a very good legal defense in court, and we remain hopeful that the South Dakota Supreme Court will make the right decision.
And we heard from Governor Noem earlier in the program in her public service announcement, talking about what the state is doing to prepare for the medical marijuana program. She didn't address recreational marijuana in that public service announcement.
Well, it's a real change of position. A few months ago during the legislative session, Governor Nome was advocating for very harsh policies. She wanted to delay the entire implementation of Measure 26 by a whole year. And at the same time, she wanted Amendment A thrown out in court. So effectively, her position was that medical marijuana patients, including people with cancer, epilepsy, and other serious conditions, should face up to a year in county jail for even 1 gram of marijuana all the way until July 1st of 2022. And now all of a sudden she wants to present herself as a supporter of medical marijuana. I think these ads contain very little helpful information for the public. I know that Governor Nome has put these ads on TV, they're on digital, they're on radio as well. I would have preferred for these ads to actually tell people about the timeline for when patient ID cards will be available. I think these ads are essentially an apology tour. They're a PR job to rehabilitate Governor Nome's image on this position. And if that's the purpose, which it sure seems to be, then she should use her campaign funds to pay for these ads. I think the taxpayer money should have been reserved for ads that actually helped inform the public, and these ads don't do that.
We do know that the South Dakota Department of Health is going to be taking public input in some town halls and online as well, and when it comes to refining the program, the medical marijuana program. But what about lawmakers? What do you think they'll be doing during the next session regarding the issue of recreational marijuana?
Well, first, I appreciate the legislators who rejected Governor Nome's severe delays during the last session. I know that legislators in Pierre are taking a close look at medical and recreational. I think everybody is waiting to see what happens in this court battle. And if Amendment A is restored by the South Dakota Supreme Court, I expect that legislators will come together and start to think about potential legislation next year. And we'll want to work with them to make sure that that legislation is in accordance with Amendment A and allows the state to implement the law in a timely manner.
Do you see the general public's views on marijuana changing? It seems like it can be a very polarizing subject.
Well, we got involved in this campaign because we did our research and we found that a very strong majority of South Dakotans were ready to approve medical marijuana and a very solid majority were ready to approve recreational. Our job as ballot initiative campaign managers isn't to convert states, it's to give the people what they want when politicians don't listen to them. But yes, I have seen working across the country views changing very quickly, even in conservative states like South Dakota. So I wasn't surprised when the polling said that we could do this. And I think over the course of our campaign, we built support even higher. And I think that there's even more support today after seeing what the politicians have been trying to do to thwart the will of the people. I think that support is even higher now than it was on Election Day. And people are realizing that legalizing, regulating, and taxing marijuana is the smart public policy decision. And it defends personal freedom, which is something that the governor talks a lot about. I don't think that spending taxpayer money to overturn a law approved by voters so that you can sustain a policy that increases the size and power of government in South Dakota is really advancing the ideal of personal freedom. I see our campaign and our advocates as the ones who are really trying to uphold the ideal of personal freedom. And South Dakota is a state where people respect that idea, and that's why we've been successful.
Okay, well, Matthew, I really appreciate you joining us, and we will be right back. That is all the time we have for today's Inside KELOLAND. If you'd like to learn more about today's topic, head to this story on KELOLAND.com. Be sure to join us again next week for more on what's going on inside KELOLAND.